So this morning we can reflect on that every one of us has many, many choices. And today you chose to come to the Abbey out of all the menu of options in this glorious spring day, and to think about what the result of that will be. This is a place to share moments with like-minded people who are thinking about developing their positive qualities and getting to know and then learning how to decrease those qualities that bring misery and harm to self and others. So I think we can rejoice in the choices that we've made so far. Quite beneficial. And then we can expand that thought to think about, as we continue to develop our good qualities and decrease those that bring difficulty and harm, that we are actually making steps toward full awakening. And it's at that stage where we would be able to benefit all beings in the most excellent way. And so let's stretch our mind to encompass that vast motivation today. And then our activities will be for the benefit of all living beings. So each month when we do the Sharing the Dharma Day, we go through different books that Venerable Chodron has written. And we're currently on An Open-Hearted Life, which is a beautiful book that teaches about ways to increase our compassion. And she wrote this book with a psychologist from Eastern Washington University, Russell Colts. And so they take turns kind of writing each chapter and bringing their view, either a Buddhist view or a psychological view, to what compassion is and how to develop it and what are the difficulties with developing it. And so it's quite beneficial, I think. So we're still in the early stages of the book, part one, which is compassion, what is it, what it isn't, and why it's worth cultivating. And we're on chapter 7 this week, or this month, and it's about confusion about compassion. So I'll read a little bit from the chapter and then maybe make a few comments. And then at the end, we'll have some time for some comments and a little discussion if people have questions. So this is a chapter that Venerable Chodron wrote. And she writes, while everyone admires compassion, there's a lot of confusion about it. In addition to learning what compassion is, it's good to also know what it isn't. So maybe I'll just first talk a little bit about what it is. So compassion is an attitude. It's not necessarily a behavior. It's an attitude. And then that attitude moves me toward certain behaviors. And in Buddhism, compassion is the wish for others to not suffer and not to have the causes of suffering. And it's also quite connected to love, which is the wish for others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And so it's this attitude that then informs kind of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Because behaviors, you don't really, when you see a behavior, you don't really know what the motivation is. A behavior can look very disturbing, and yet the motivation comes from compassion and love. So, like when a parent pulls their child out of the street in a kind of a violent way really quickly so they don't get hit by a car. that behavior doesn't look so compassionate, but of course it is. So, and then other times people can relate with seemingly smiles and, very kind and compassionate, but their motivation inside is to take advantage or to do harm. So we want to cultivate this attitude in our heart to be kind to others, to be compassionate, to care for others. And then we move from that space. So she continues, having compassion does not mean we become people pleasers. The motivation of a people pleaser is self-protection. It's often wanting other people to think well of us or to be nice of us. And so it centers more on us than on other. And it's quite common, I think, to be conditioned in this society to be a people pleaser. Are there people pleasers in this room? Yeah. And so pardon? So the difficulty with people pleasing is that, at least for me, when I get into that mind, I have to kind of ignore myself. I kind of have to get invisible, and then I'm focused on other and what I think they need, and then what I can do so that they're okay. And the trouble with that over time is that it can build up a lot of resentment and anger. And then all of a sudden, boom, it pops out. So it's not a very effective means. It doesn't really work very well, even though we're kind of conditioned to do that often. So to really look to see what our motivation is before we do an action, or maybe even before that, to notice if we're totally consumed and focused on something outside of ourselves and we're not aware of kind of where we are with the circumstance. And so that takes some effort and takes some practice, and it takes get to knowing ourselves. And so the easiest way to do that is to do that on the meditation cushion. Because on the meditation cushion, we're focused inward to understand how our mind and how our heart works. And so that's the best place. Mostly when we're in our days doing all of our activities, we're focused outward. We're taking in what's going on around us, and we're reacting to what is arising around us all the time. So we're more focused outward. When we're doing meditation, we let go of all of that, and we bring all of our attention inward. And it's so rich and beneficial. Because if we understand how our heart and mind work, then we know how we can benefit others and also ourselves. Especially in this society, because we're quite hard on ourselves generally. And when I'm hard on myself, I'm hard on those around me. So there's a direct connection between those two. So in Buddhism, there's so many methods to start working on figuring out how to be kind to myself. And as I've done that over the years, then I'm kinder to others also. So it really has a great benefit, I would say. The second point that Venerable writes about is that compassion does not involve interfering in other people's lives and fixing their problems. So who are the fix-it ones here? Yeah, that's also very, very common, isn't it? Gosh. Yeah, let me just tell them about how to do it, and then of course the mind is thinking, so then they'll do it, and then everything will be great. And of course, what happens when we tell somebody how to do it? Has that ever worked? I mean, it may work if you're a parent with children and they will do it, but watch out. There's a price to pay for that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it doesn't really work. Yeah, but boy, we are very conditioned to, again, and it's because of this kind of environment that we live in and our kind of body we have and the senses. We're taking in information all the time. And so we're focused on what everybody else is doing. And so then it just follows that I'm focused on what everybody else is doing. And so now I see when you're doing something wrong. And so let me point that out to you. Yeah. Gosh, that just doesn't work. I've tried it, I don't know, 850 million times in my life, again and again. It doesn't work. Yeah. Again, I could bring this back to if we think about the attitude of compassion, that I want another person not to suffer and to have happiness. If I can remember that, then I also can remember if I try to tell somebody else what to do, that is going to bring some suffering for them. Why? Because I am not very skillful in how to do that. So it's a rare time to give a person feedback from a compassionate heart that then lands and the person gets that I'm saying something out of compassion. That's a difficult practice, at least for me. I don't know, do other people have that, or is that quite easy that you can, tap into your compassion and then tell someone, and then especially if it's something that has some what they would consider maybe criticism, because that's what happens when somebody tells me what to do. I hear it as criticism. We have this saying here in the Abbey in the community that we oftentimes see help as harm. Yeah, so somebody's trying to help, but, we can't take it in. And maybe the person, how they're saying it isn't, maybe it's mixed. There's some compassion there, but there also is, I want to tell you what to do right. And when you come with that kind of energy, it doesn't land very well. So that's a very advanced practice, I think, yeah. To work with trying to get other people to, do a certain thing. And of course, again, it's all about balance. So if I'm totally focused on what somebody else is doing and what I know that, I may have some information about what, if somebody did something a different way, it would be better for them and better for those around them. I may have that information. But, when my energy is all about them moving into the mind I have and to do it this way, that just does not go into the heart of the other person, It's seen as controlling and, don't tell me and, So this is a very complicated and takes a lot of years of practice, I think, to be skillful at doing this. Yeah. And so what Venerable says about this is becoming Ms. or Mr. Fix-It brings the focus back to us. We think, I can't stand to see another person suffer. I've got to do something about it. With this thought, we risk getting more involved than the other person wants. We've become so energized by the thought, I'm going to solve her or his problem, that we may inadvertently make the other person feel powerless and helpless. No one wants other people to control their life out of a mistaken sense of compassion. And so sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to teach others how to help solve their own problems, and then step back, give them the opportunity to do so. When they succeed, their self-confidence will increase. And if they don't, then hopefully they'll learn from their mistakes. If they ask us for tips on how to deal with the situation, we can do that while at the same time respecting their autonomy. So that's a really important point. And so it's about balance. It's about what kind of energy I come with to talk to another person about something and how I frame it, what language I use. If I talk about how I've learned about doing a certain thing a certain way and it brings a good result, that's a different way to tell something about something than to say, you should do this and this and this instead of that. So, again, this is a complicated process, I think. Takes a lot of practice. Then the third point that she talks about is that compassion does not entail becoming a doormat that others trample on or allowing others to take advantage of us. And she makes the important point here that compassion does not involve misdirected forgiveness, such as in the case of domestic violence. So, becoming silent and let the violence continue or the verbal abuse continue, and to not make any, movement or action around that. And this does not help anyone in that situation, anyone. So she writes, when our children or we are in danger, we should leave the situation immediately and not return until the other person has received the help they need so that the violence has ceased and the situation is safe. So although we maintain compassion for others who are overwhelmed by disturbing emotions, we do not allow them to harm us. This is not only for our own safety, but also for their benefit, since they will face many problems due to their violent behavior. So you can see how she's talking about this. That kind of action, getting out of a situation where somebody is out of control with their emotions, is compassionate for the recipient and also compassionate for the person that is behaving that way. And so that's compassion for everyone involved in the situation. And of course, that's a very difficult situation, and for women primarily are involved in this. Not always, sometimes it's men. But whoever it is, to try to get some help so that you don't have to maneuver all of this on your own is really beneficial. And there are many, many services in the world now to help people that are feeling unsafe where they are. And even sometimes I go to the universities around and we do talks or whatever, and oftentimes in the bathrooms there's a poster that says, do you feel unsafe at home? Call this number. And so they're even reaching out to people that, you don't have to, which the message is, you don't have to accept that. There's choices here, and let's help you. And so to really, again, it takes so much wisdom, so much thinking about what compassion actually is. It isn't compassionate for me to go silent when there's something that isn't going properly in front of me. I get to find my voice. Yeah, I get to find my voice. Then the next point that she talks about, in fact, compassion may entail acting in a way that the other person does not like at all. With genuine compassion, we may even have to jeopardize a relationship with someone we care about in order to benefit that person. That's an important sentence. I'm going to read that one again. With genuine compassion, we may even have to jeopardize a relationship with someone we care about in order to benefit that person. And then she tells a story. A man once told me that as a teenager, he acted out and got into a lot of trouble with the law. Each time his mother would go to court and get him out, and then he would still drink or sell drugs yet again. But one time his mother looked at the judge and said, "My son is out of control. You keep him." And she left the court. So he was stunned as he sat in jail for a while. And at first he was quite upset, but it made him reflect on his behavior and stop taking his mother's kindness for granted. And as a result, he started to transform his behavior and look at what he was doing and, started doing something different. So that's a good example of, finding your voice in a difficult situation and really getting clear about what compassion is. Her next point is compassion also gives us the confidence to say no when faced with somebody's maybe not so positive behavior. She uses the word manipulative behavior. And so I think in this one, again, it has to do with trying to understand what another person is doing. That's the first thing, and that's hard enough. So you have to get some information and ask questions and get curious. That's the first thing. And then you have to start thinking about, what is a compassionate response to this? And I don't know about you, but so often somebody will say something and I will have an emotional reaction. My nervous system is reactive. I can feel it. And when I start talking from that place, I guarantee you that is not compassion. That is not compassion. And it is not so skillful. And so a lot of the time for me, the practice is not saying anything and trying to get clear about what the reaction is all about that's going on with me, and then going back later. And in this society, we don't have a whole lot of tolerance, I think, to let ourselves, each other, to kind of figure out what's going on before we continue a conversation. We want to know the answer right away. We feel like we have to say something right away. And we don't. We can use different language. Gosh, I'm reacting right now. I need to figure out what's going on with me. I'm happy to come back and talk to you when I have more information. And when I've done that, I have never said, or I've never heard anybody tell me, no, you have to talk this moment. People don't say that. So we just have to get in the habit of recognizing when we're reactive. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in a reactive state, it usually doesn't go so well, because I've got some adrenaline on board, so it's my lower functioning reptile brain that's trying to talk, and it's kind of messy. It doesn't work so well. No. Then she says, compassion is a gift that we give freely to others. Expecting something in return, even a thank you, can lead to disappointment. And even if someone thanks us, it is the person who gives thanks, not the one who receives it, who benefits the most. So the person who gives thanks experiences happiness because he or she is showing their appreciation for and willingness to return kindness. And when someone doesn't thank us, that doesn't have to diminish our joy or our compassion. That's interesting, So again, we're back to motivation. If I'm helping somebody, is part of my motivation that they will see me as a compassionate person, and then they will like me, and they will be, thanking me, and, So that's a slippery slope, again, because it usually ends up in a lot of disappointment, And so that's kind of compassion with strings attached. And so that, again, it's messy, it's kind of a mixed motivation. So again, When someone doesn't thank us, that doesn't have to diminish our joy or our compassion. In other words, our pleasure comes from the act of giving, not from someone showing appreciation for what we have done. We feel content because we have acted in accordance with our own values. And when I think in my life when I've been compassionate, often it's the easiest to be compassionate to a stranger. Like sometimes I've, given something to a homeless person or something, and they have no story about me. I have no story about them really. And it just is freely given, and there's no strings, and that feels very joyous to the heart, very joyous. But still, if we work with our mind and work with our intention and our motivation and stay with, I want to show some compassion to this person, and it doesn't matter how they react, then that's very helpful, especially when we get to the place where we can actually give some feedback that may be hard for the person to hear, but it's coming from compassion. Then if their reaction isn't so good, so wonderful, it's still okay because I'm focused on my motivation, what I'm trying to do. She continues then to write, we may encounter many different situations during the course of our lives when feelings of compassion arise naturally within us. Moved by the suffering that we've observed, we may find ourselves motivated to act to make things better. In these situations, it's important to honestly assess what we are capable of doing and what we aren't. Then we can act effectively, contributing to what we're able to do without inappropriately trying to shoulder burdens that we're incapable of handling or which aren't ours to carry. And so again, this is very important to kind of think about, when we are moved by somebody's suffering, to think about what our capacity is really important. And not to diminish, I think, the power of how we think about the situation. There is the power of prayer. There is the power of imagining helping someone when I don't have the capacity to do that. For example, when, terrible earthquakes or, something like that, or war situations happen. And, I can't go over there and, help these people that are suffering. I can't do anything with that. But from my own side, I can send them much compassion from my heart. I can imagine them getting what they need and being safe. I can imagine the people that are causing this war to get some wisdom and to get some clarity about what they're doing. I can also think about today that I didn't harm anyone. I am contributing to the peace of the world. All of these make a difference. These are not minor little actions. We have to remember that. These are very powerful, very important. This has a ripple effect in this world. Yeah. So really, there's no time when we can feel helpless, I think. We don't need to feel helpless, And of course, then the opposite of that is when we start getting angry at what they're doing. And then when I do that, I am putting more anger into the world. That is not helpful. That is not helpful. There's enough. Wouldn't we all agree? There's enough. There's enough. So it's up to me to work with my distress and work with my mind. So instead, I find a way to find some compassion, because people that are acting in ways that are harming, they don't need harm. They need compassion. They need compassion. And it's quite easy to send compassion to those that are very confused and are creating wars in other places. it's easy for me to do that. I'm not in their midst. I'm not trying to talk to them directly, but I am showing them in my mind, in my heart. I'm thinking in ways, and you can do that very creatively. That the person is over there and they're getting angry and they want to bomb things, and that they have this moment when maybe their child comes in or a pet or something comes in, touches their heart, and they turn their mind and they let go of some of their confusion and their anger, and they don't act in such a harmful way then. Because that's certainly possible, isn't it? Of course it is, because everybody is surrounded by people that loves them. We forget that about people that we disdain and think are, creating such terrible things in this world. So there's many things that we can do from afar that will benefit this world and that are powerful. It's really helpful to consider that. And, we have that experience. We know that. Have you ever been in a huge crowd and somebody freaks out and they start to run? And you can feel the anxiety throughout the whole crowd, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be some kind of mob thing. And yet, if you stay centered and you keep your heart open, and and you might even say, it's all right, it's okay, and then that ripple leaves, and instead a different ripple comes, which is some, we're fine, it's okay, So, and even in our own families, we can do that. Somebody is terribly upset, and we meet that with understanding and an open mind and an open heart, and just, give them some empathy back. And they calm down. Or people do that to us, to me, I calm down. So if we can do that close by, we can also do that, from some distance. It makes an effect. I think it's helpful to open our minds to that, open our hearts to that. And the basis of that is that we are so all interconnected. Everything that we're doing right here is affecting this world right now. It's affecting the animals on the land. It's affecting everything that's growing here. And, it goes out and affects others. And then when we all leave here, we take a piece of this with us. And then the people that we meet, and we go get gas, or we go to the store, or we go home, then that kind of energy affects those around us. Have you not seen that? Hello? Has anyone seen that? Yeah, I think so. And if not, pay attention. Do the experiment. You don't have to believe me. Do the experiment. See if that's true or not. I think we're much more powerful than we think we are when we're acting from a compassionate, heartfelt, loving place. So she continues to talk about this a little more. Sometimes our feelings of compassion are greater than what we or anyone else are capable of doing in response. For example, after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, we may have felt a strong compassion for those left homeless or injured. However, as one individual, we're incapable of remedying the entire tragedy. Instead, we must do what we're capable of doing. For example, making a donation to a charity organization. And to maintain a compassionate state, even when we are unable to extend practical help, we can do things. There's a practice that we do called the taking and giving practice, which will be described later in the book, so we can do that. But what I just described earlier about, thinking of sending them, what they need, getting clear in our minds that they will get what they need, that there are resources, that there are kind people that are there in the area that can help, and that I want to support them with my own love and compassion, and I send that to them. Yeah. So I think many different ways that we can not feel like we're powerless. because I don't think we are powerless. Yeah. So those are a lot of points in this book. It's jam-packed and it's like 3 pages. So do people have comments about any of this or questions?
In the beginning, you were talking about not being bossy, but telling people how to do things and maybe coming across that way.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about being here today and being with new people that didn't know some of what you do around here. And so I was giving instruction, and partly it made me feel like I was maybe being a little bossy or a know-it-all. And so what do you think about that?
Yeah, so 2 things. I know you.
Yeah.
And so I had heard you talk to people and help them maneuver this strange place to a new person. What is this and what are you doing here? And so I have never heard anything bossy come out of your mouth, I will say. But for me to say that, that's just my observation. For you to tap into what your heart was telling you, what was your motivation? Were you trying to be, I know everything here and you know nothing, so let me tell you? No. Did it come from that place? No. Yeah, so that wouldn't be compassionate. So check up, where'd it come from?
Part I was thinking too at the time is like, I know for me, I would rather have somebody else tell me than have a monastic come up and tell me. You know what I mean? So
And why is that?
Probably because I don't want to.
We wear deodorant, come on.
Probably because I don't want to, I don't.
We're scary. Oh my gosh!
No, I think just instructions. I don't know.
I'm kidding you.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I love you guys.
Yeah.
Monastics.
Yes. Yeah. So again, it all is about where it's coming from, and that takes some time to discern if we haven't really ever examined that. If we're just used to, blah blah blah. And we don't have any connection to ourselves, then, and sometimes when I'm in that place in my mind and I say something and it's like I get back something that's kind of, then often it's because I didn't check in to see where that's coming from. Yeah, so it's a slow process. It's the faster we go, the more difficult it gets to communicate. It seems to me. Yeah. So to give ourselves the opportunity to slow down a little bit so that we can do this from a compassionate place, because all of us, everyone, no one wants to suffer. Everyone wants happiness. And so it takes time to interact from that place, I think. Yeah. Because we all have habits, I mean, most of my verbal habits come from how my parents talked to me and how their parents talked and how they're... So, it's just what it is. It wasn't so skillful, I'll tell you, but that's what it was. So, now what? Well, the good news is I can change all that. And that's much of what practice is about. And so it's about looking at my habits of mind, not what you all are doing, what I'm doing. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else pops up for people? Any question is just perfect. Yeah. Or any comment too.
Well, to carry on with that, it's great to look at compassion from, like I said, not from a perspective of wanting to help and wanting to change things. It's just wanting to wish everybody well. And I've only learned a few little things from you guys. And like you said, the biggest thing I picked up here today was, to look back at my motivations. I have a very, very bad habit of not doing that.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's my only comment. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there people in the room that are very clear about their motivations all the time? Raise your hand. See, we're all in the same boat. All in the same boat. Yeah. It's such a habit. All in the same boat. Often the best we can do is, at least what I can do, is after the fact, then I see, not being clear on my motivation, what then rolled out and what that ended up being. And so then there's another very important practice at that point. I have two choices. I can beat myself up and think that I am really ignorant, and that has some effect, one effect to me. Or I can say, there it is again. That's not what I want to do. And so let me see how I can slow things down, be a little more mindful. And especially in a situation like this, whatever it is, let me remind myself about those kinds of situations, because we can see patterns to how we react often, So there are certain patterns that come up, when somebody comes up to me, for example, with a bunch of energy, a lot of energy, and just starts talking away without giving me a little information about what we're talking about, that throws me off. And I get very reactive, and it's hard for me to hear. And often I'll either fall into people pleasing or getting irritated. And neither of those work well. So I just know that that's just a habit I have. And it's not good or bad, right or wrong. I don't have to beat myself up about it. I've just noticed that I have that. So now what I try to do when that energy comes, and there's nothing wrong with that energy either. This isn't about blame. We have to get out of that mind state. It's not about blame. It's just, this is our conditions. This is how we communicate. That's all it is. But when that comes up to me, I try to say something like, okay, I try to reflect back. Okay, what you're wanting to talk about now is da-da-da. And then that gives me a little time. That interrupts the energy a little bit. I can take a deep breath. And then I can think, do I have the time for that? Do I have the resource for that? Is this a huge thing or a minor thing? All these different things. I can then make the decision. I can listen, I can interact, or I can't. So that takes some time to figure out, about oneself. If I'm trying to beat myself into being compassionate, I will never get to any of those questions. So the first thing is that I have to accept whatever my reaction is. It's just what it is. And we all have reactions. We all have our own version. And when you start thinking about that, every person in this room has their own version. And yet, we can communicate. That astounds me, actually. We're quite skillful. That we can actually communicate and connect with one another. So having a lot of compassion for ourselves and acceptance really is just so key. It's so key. Yeah.
So listening, I think in the beginning about situations with others and showing compassion as opposed to reacting with guilt. For me, the word control or the action of control popped up in anyway for me in my experience, and I'm still finding it amazing. I've never been good at feeling or showing emotions, so to me it seems like sometimes with that guilt or whatever is behind the action you use to kind of put out a fire with someone, it's less like you're experiencing your life or taking part in it, as opposed to trying to control it and make it look the way you want all the time, kind of, falsely painting this picture that's really not there.
Yeah.
And not allowing, for me,
Yeah.
not really allowing myself to feel, out of fear or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's really a good insight that you have. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. What that tells me is that you have thought about this a lot on the cushion, and you know your mind pretty well. Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. 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 There's a lot of disconnects that we can have when we're maneuvering in the world, and to start noticing when our heart isn't connected is really helpful. Really helpful. That we're all up here, or we're defended. Either it's body defense to me, or it's all up here, and I'm managing it with, the computer. And that's not so helpful. So I think oftentimes I say to myself, when I notice that, I say, drop it down. And that just means bring it to your heart. And then when I think about something through the heart, that's a different experience. That comes through a different way. Or sometimes it is, why can't I drop it down? Why can't I? What's going on? And like Matt, what you said, often for me, it's fear. It's fear. Yeah. Yeah. It's either fear or it's grief, one or the other. I don't want to feel something that's so sad, and I don't want to grieve, or I'm fearful. So it's one or the other. And so to, try to explore that a little bit as I can in my own time, with my resource that I have, just to allow that, accept that. So this is kind of an ongoing process of being kind to ourselves and trying to open our hearts to ourselves so that we can open our hearts to others. And why? Because that's the place where there is the most ease and happiness and contentment, and the most energy then that we get. I mean, think about it. A day that you have where your mind is criticizing. We wake up sometimes that way. I do. Criticize. It's just getting up on the wrong side of the bed day. At the end of the day, are you not exhausted? Exhausted. No energy left. Exhausted. And then think about a day when things are pretty positive, you have a lot of resource, there's some energy, and you're wanting to help, and you help, and you're thinking about others more. End of the day, there's resource left. You're full of some joy, some compassion, Again, don't just take my word for it. Do the experiment. See what happens. With what the Buddha taught, we have the opportunity to find ease and joy and contentment and love and compassion every moment. Every moment. That's what he did, and then that's what he taught. When I just think about having a day, one day, without a critical thought coming into my mind, what a joy that would be. Just that. What a joy that would be. Yeah. And then when I look over the years, I'm going toward that. If we do these practices and look inward, we get closer to that, all of us, every one of us. And of course, that's what the Buddha taught. There is no living being that cannot come to this. And so then we start thinking, what gets in the way? My lack of confidence in myself, my focus on others instead of what I'm doing, my mind that has created what I want it to be versus what it is. Those are all things that pull me from this. Yeah. And so just the practice of taking a break in the day and slowing down and finding your breath and getting embodied again, coming back into the body. Here I am. How am I doing? What's going on? What do I need? Then those questions open to what the reality is. I'm trying really hard. I'm doing the very best I can with the energy I have. I mean, who consciously says in this room, okay, today I'm going to do the worst I can? Whoever thinks that? We never think that. Yet we react to ourselves as if we are doing the worst. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. It's not reality. When we align ourselves with reality, we have more ease. And what is the reality? We all want happiness. We don't want suffering. We all have compassion, kindness, love, care in our hearts for others. Different degrees, okay. But it all can be developed. And so that's what we have the potential to do. That's what's in front of us. And we can support one another while we do it. There's nothing better than that.